Hi, my name is Renee Corbett. I will be discussing the pros and cons of checks and balances and federalism within America today. So first up is going to be checks and balances, and that is a separation of power. It's a government-implemented system that allows the three separate branches of government to work together in a way that limits total power and control on one part. So basically, it's united. Seen in the quote by Crash Course, it says the main job of the legislator is to essentially make laws. The executive branch is to execute the laws and carry them out. The president is like the CEO, which makes sure the government governs, and the judiciary's job is to interpret the law and explain what it actually means. Over there on the side, we can see the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. The executive branch is made up of a variety of executive officials, whether it's the president, vice president, or cabinet members, and their way to serve is carrying out laws, which can be vetoing laws, proposing new ones, negotiating, calling for war, appointing judges, and a lot more. The legislative branch allows Congress to make the laws so they can impeach the president and judges. They can override those vetoes and utilize money and create lower courts. The judicial branch ensures that both Congress and executive figures are using their power for constitutional purposes and making sure that they aren't unconstitutional. If they are, they can declare them to be unconstitutional. And then they can deem people to be guilty or not guilty, whether it is a state court, federal court, whatever it may be. And then from Bill of Rights Institute, it talks about James Madison theorizing that the Constitution grants each branch its power, and that is an honorable ambition that serves the highest interest of people that would work to maintain separation. So checks and balances were made so that people could work on individual scales to then a bigger scale to federalism. So if the judiciary power was separated from the legislative and executive, there would be no liberty. And then if it was with the legislative and executive, our life and liberty would be controlled through randomization and not constitutionality. It can demonstrate that liberty, freedom, and equality will not be what it is if all of that power was given to one singular branch rather than the three parts that are needed to execute and control and make decisions and dictate. So if checks and balances were without a system, it just wouldn't work. There would be violence and a sense of chaos because they are not meant to be joint, but separate, but not too separate to the point where they aren't unified. Their jobs are too busy and different to be one, but it ensures an equal playing field with different specialties. So continuing with that, federalism is an upheld system by the government that allows power to be distributed and on a national, local, and state scale. There are overseers for issues and policies, and federalism can encourage checks and balances through moving the central authority across all of the three branches. So each national, state, and local government has its own rules, regulations, and responsibilities to tend to. Powers are stated in the Constitution, and what is not given to the government there is then given to the states. And so with federalism, it can encourage political participation, balance economics, and agreeable policies. Madison says that one power has a hold of another power, which the fundamental principles of a free constitution are sort of undermined here. Branches of powers are not meant to be kept separate. If there was a time where one branch controlled everything, there would be no bias, no other opinions, and an excessive amount of power that is just unnecessary. So without delegation, it's just inefficient. Political participation is encouraged because the people of the United States can vote on who they want to be representing their country and who they want to be delegating tasks. Then with balanced economics, it can be a way to ensure that a race to the bottom isn't happening. With each branch working with each individual state, it can ensure that policies aren't being implemented that will throw off the economies or make them think that they're in competition with another state, which is why agreeable policies are then also part of this. Each state will have different policies and might have different policies, so putting central government and local government to work together through federalism can be a way to make it efficient and effective. Continuing with the pros and cons of checks and balances, the pros are it oversees all decisions, promotes accountability and balance, ensures compromise and stability, and the cons would be conflicting values and delayed decisions because the majority might be blocked through a vote, and certain policies need to be utilized and in effect immediately. It is said that the powers of national government are separated and each branch are able to check others because it makes it difficult for the government to act in ways that are harmful to interests of citizens. And so checks and balances allow limitations to be set in stone. There's no chance of tyranny. And with the pros, the stability is because each branch has a specialization, so one branch doesn't have to worry about the other one, and that can help with balance and accountability, keeping one another in line and in check of what policies you're implementing. And then with compromise, it allows each of them to see all important point of views rather than their own, rather than being biased. But then on the cons portion, it encourages constant tension and conflict, but that conflict can also be beneficial, and the Constitution smiles upon it, which is stated by the Bill of Rights institution. So this can be viewed as both positive and negative. Positive because it ensures that all views are obviously being seen, but negative because it can delay and postpone decisions that need to be made right away. Then it's also interesting because the same place states that the legislative branch should be the superior branch and therefore the one with the most restraint, which this can negatively impact the other ones because they will think that they have more power. And they said they reasoned this the case because we, the people, govern ourselves through the laws we give ourselves through our elected representatives in the legislative branch. But being able to govern ourselves at a federalism and checks and balances level is interesting because we already are aware that we have a say, but federalism allows us to vote locally and nationally on our representatives and our laws. So everything is basically self-caused. With pros and cons for federalism, the pros are it allows checks and balances on a state and nationwide basis. It doesn't look at a singular branch, but how they all work together for the better, and there is less risk of tyranny because of conflict management. And then the cons are what is implemented in one state may not be applicable to the others. So each state will have a different policy, and that will affect how they carry out their laws and their judicial effects. And then state and national power are at risk because state authority and national authority are constantly butting heads. So the advantages and disadvantages of federalism from Shivaji College states that the cookie cutter method of law and policy making usually end up with solutions that are effective in some states and less effective in others. And then to allow states to create solutions to their own problems using policies and laws that work best in their state means that states can come up with their own solutions, making government more efficient. But just because one policy works in one state doesn't mean it will work in another. Then this is because of the leaders and the citizens who vote on policies. They have different point of views and different representatives, because this can go back to my knowledge of Obergefell versus Hodges and homosexual marriages and the different rules in regards to marriage license, therefore leading to confusion between states because it ultimately tries to make them reach a national level of understanding rather than state. So federalism and checks and balances will always be threatened by disputes and conflicts, but it can allow us to deal with small-scale issues on a national level and be part of a community and with each branch. Our checks and balances within federalism can allow people to take their vote with sincerity. And then this project helped me put into perspective how many parts there are to running our country and how important it is to delegate tasks to different people in different cabinets and all of those sorts. The most important thing I learned would be the idea that state policies are not national policies. So when it comes to judging rights and wrongs on different levels of authority, it can be tough. And this project has also helped me realize why voting is so important and what representation is giving me. It allows me to understand why our democracy and federalism take is so important. And the one thing I disliked the most would be finding sources because it was kind of tough for me. And then here are my sources.